Oh shit. As you can see right here, my 2012 Z1000 now has 30,127 miles. I bought this bike brand new in November of 2012. I don't remember exactly how many miles were on it. I think there was like 16 after the test drive. But I figured I would do a 3.5 year, because it's now fucking May of 2016. Jesus, I'm getting old. Fucking hey. That's when it comes to November of 2012, and I always knew in 2010 when these came out, I was going to get one. Like, I love the way they look. Everybody says they rode great, great power, great handling, all that shit. So, like, I was all about it, you know? And I had already had a Z1000 before. I had that 03Z, which was a lot of fun. See any cops? Speaking of power. Yep, little power wheelie for you. Yeah, so it's like, I knew I wanted a Z. You know, I had always wanted the 2010 one. So I went to the dealership, not really intending to buy a bike, but I kind of had it in the back of my head. And I asked him what the trade-in for my 04 ZX6R would be, and it was like $3,000, which was cool with me. I paid like, I think 37 for it or something like that. I knew I could have got more on private sale, but I just wanted the convenience, fuck it. And I took this thing for a test ride, and instantly, like, I loved the sound of the motor. It was very thumpy. You could hear those 1,000cc pistons, you know, well, 250cc pistons, all four of them, going boom, 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 you know. And I was like, this thing is, you know, it's sweet, it's fast, it's comfortable. It felt so easy to ride in comparison to my ZX6R. I felt like I was always fighting that bike, like always, always, always. And it was so nice to get on a bike that didn't require me to you know, fuck with it in order to get it to turn or to get power out of it. You know, this thing, when you're in 6th gear on the highway, you don't need to drop gears to pass cars. You know, on a 600, I always felt like I had to drop 2 gears into 4th before I had any power. And it was like, you know, work. You know, work to get the power, work to get the thing to turn. I know they say 600 is supposed to be light, but that fucker, for whatever reason, was a pig in the corners. Well, that wasn't that great, but it felt not good. You know, it made me work a whole hell of a lot. It made me very sore. So, when I was on the test drive for this bike, I like gave it some acceleration, and then to see how it leaned, I pulled off on like an exit like this one, although it was fully paved, like a driveway, someone's driveway, of a residential street, and I turned in, and it felt great. Like, all right, cool. So I turned the bike around and headed out, and as I turned left back onto the road, I gave it some gas, and I slid the rear tire slightly, just a little kick. And I had never ever done that on my ZX6R, and it like it didn't completely freak me out. I was like, oh, I slid the rear, like, holy shit. So I slid the rear tire, and I was like, not only does this bike have the power to do that, but it does it so calmly. Like, I felt so comfortable on it, so in control, even when shit like that was happening. Wrote him a check, and I rode out on this bad boy, and I've had it for 3 years since. What I love about this bike is I can ride hours upon hours upon hours and be fine with it. That's, you know, that's one of the recurring themes is I do everything. I just got my knee down 5 seconds ago. I love to do wheelies. You know, I like this general sport biker guy. I used to do a shitload of track days back in 2013, 2014. I haven't done one in a while, but I used to do a shitload on this bad boy. And, you know, stomping 600s, depending on the class. The expert guys were obviously faster, but toward the end of my career, I was one of the fastest guys in intermediate. Just on the cusp of advanced, and I'm basically using a 480-pound Street Fighter. But I loved it. Again, this bike feels to me like it just wants to take care of me. Like, I trust it so completely. You know, like sliding the rear tire can be kind of scary, but it's like, you know, I'm not leaving big-ass black lines on the road, but I'm breaking traction, and it's not like a huge fucking oh shit moment. It's sort of like, whoop, that's too much, you know? Give you a lot of performance. Probably more bike than you can handle. Unless you're higher than intermediate on track, if you're you're doing track days in the novice class, this bike's faster than you are, no question. And all the way up through intermediate, that's pretty much the only place you're going to start running into issues with it, is when you start creeping toward advanced, you know? Other than that, it's way more bike than most people could even comprehend how much performance is available, which is obviously quite a lot. But again, it's what makes bikes fun. You know, we like the performance. We like, we like the performance. We like to have fun. You guys probably couldn't see that on camera, but my rear tire hit something like a stick. Just made a little noise. And that's one of the things I was talking about with this bike, is it doesn't matter. You know, you just go. The bike will always sort it out. That's a perfect example of how this bike doesn't faze me. You know, a little change of direction and she got a little out of shape, I don't care. Like, it feels, I know right where to point it. I know what it's going to do, you know? So it doesn't really freak me out when it does that kind of shit. And I think that's a confidence thing that a lot of people don't have with their bikes is, you know, what's it going to do when it starts moving around on you? You know, when its wheels in line, everybody's happy. But if she starts to get squirrely, what happens? And for a lot of people, they want a bike to be wheels in line 24/7, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's essentially saying I want a bike that handles extremely well always. Of course, that's great. You know, you'll get that with a Super Sport. You'll get that with a 600 or a 1000. You know, but what's great about this bike is it has a lot of character because of that. When you're riding it, it gives you a riding experience where you just feel like you're taming this bucking bronco almost. Not like in a now this. I'm biased because I had a lot of trust and faith in the bike. For a new rider, it might be a little much, but for me, I love it because it gives me that feeling of being a good rider. Being able to have these things happen and stay calm and be like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Like, let's see if I crash right here. Woo! Nope. So that leads me on to the very next issue with this bike, which is it has a thing buzzards. It has a thing called a fuel cut. So it has what's called a fuel cut. And at any throttle setting above 3,600 RPM, the bike cuts power entirely when you roll off the gas. So with a normal motorcycle, like a Super Sport, when you roll off the gas, the motor is still receiving the amount of fuel it would need to idle, right? So this changes a few things. A, engine braking characteristics. The engine braking on this bike is actually pretty ferocious, and it's because the motor is completely off. As you increase gasoline going into the engine, there's going to be less engine braking when you roll off. So if you have a regular bike like a 600 and you turn your idle up, you'll reduce the amount of engine braking when you shut the throttle. And this can help, like on the racetrack, if you don't have electronics that allow you to tailor that, you can just up your idle a little bit, assuming that it's, you know, not ridiculously high, to reduce your engine braking. And that can make it a little bit easier if you feel like you're getting too much out of the rear. And then the other issue with the fuel cut, when you do roll back into the throttle, even it does not matter how smooth you roll in, there will always be a small jerk. There. Well, I hit that bump at the same time. But there's always a small, as it kicks the engine back on. It's like the first detonation is harsh, and it takes the driveline slack out of the motor. And there's a little bit of slack in the motor, through the transmission, and all those gears. And at that first run, they go from decelerating to accelerating, and they all get a little bit of pink when it happens. It's kind of like having, almost if you had like a loose chain, almost feels like that. For the most part, as long as you're comfortable with it, it's not really a hindrance. It's not going to, you know, put you down. But it's one of those things that for someone who's used to decent, good, you know, fueling, if you got a power commander on your bike and it's like a modern 600, the fueling's going to be spot on. So you'll get on this bike and you'll be like, whoa, man, she's touchy. And it's like, it's not that touchy, it's that the damn fuel cuts power. It just makes the riding experience not as good as it could be due to that throttle cut. Hey, another biker. See, a little bit of walk there, no issue. And then, of course, you know, like this bike wheelies very, very easily. Second gear. Simple. Even with the throttle cut, for whatever reason, wheelies always feel decent. I never felt like a super twitchy throttle doing the wheelie. The power delivery, which is so linear and so fat, you know, aside from like above 4,000 RPM, this bike makes excellent power. At 3,000 RPM, it's making the same torque as a 600, which means you get nice acceleration even at 3,000 RPM. So around town, it's fucking awesome because you can be lazy with your gear shifts when you want to be lazy. You know, it's no big deal. But anything above 4,000 or 5,000, the torque and the power is so there and so consistent. You never have that wail like on a 600cc Super Sport. You get a little bit of power, a little bit of power. You get to the mid-range, all right, it's coming on, and then those last like 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, it's like, holy fuck, here we go. And if you're on track and racing, you know, that band from like 10,000 to whatever red line is, 14, 15,000, 16,000, who fucking knows these days, that is where you want to be, you know? But when you're on the street, taking off from a stoplight, yeah, okay, a 600 will do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But in order to do that, you need to be a professional fucking drag racer who's perfect at launching, and you need to rate the clutch to do it. Like, you only get a few of those launches before the clutch is completely fucking shot. So it's not like you can let the clutch out, go 5 miles an hour on idle with the clutch completely out, then hit the throttle, and it'll get to 60 in 3 seconds. We all know, if you've ridden a 600, they cannot do that. They don't have the low-end power to do that. Whereas this bike won't get there either. It won't do its same 0 to 60 time with the clutch fully out, but it can still put a respectable acceleration down like that. Which is great. Like, it's great for riding on the street, you know, it's great for just going to work. Very torquey, very able to, you know, just exploit the power band. But at the same time, I think maybe a little bit of that is what I'm feeling, is there's never that, like, oh shit moment. Like, it's just kind of progressive, and so my throttle roll-on will be very progressive, coming up with the power the same way that the bike's making it. And it just doesn't give you that my fuck me feeling, you know? I mean, it does. If you've never ridden this bike before, or any bike of this size, like if you've ridden a 600cc or a Gixxer 750, this bike makes about the same peak horsepower as a Gixxer 750, but it makes a shitload more low-end torque. So you'll feel it's very grunty and thrumpy, and it will be very exciting to you. It is still exciting to me, but I guess all I'm saying is I wouldn't mind a little bit more. But as far as reliability goes, the bike has been essentially flawless, minus a few issues. The most recent one that's been driving me up the wall is the gas cap. This fucking gas cap got corroded a couple of times, and it wouldn't open. And the first time that happened to me, I was able to just lubricate it, and it eventually opened up. But the second time, and I'd only left the bike for like maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, not long, and this shit was corroded completely shut. And I had gone to the Three Sisters, which is west of San Antonio. It's like 6 hours away from here. And I trailered it, by the way, to ride that fucking road with my buddy. And when we got there, I had like less than a quarter of a tank, and the damn cap wouldn't open. So basically got completely fucked out of that trip by the cap. And if you're wondering how that got fixed, I called a locksmith, and he said it should have some jiggle, like that center thing right here. You might be able to see it right now. It should be able to jiggle back and forth a little bit before, you know, even when it's locked, it should have some play. And there was none at all, which meant that the barrel itself was corroded. So he stuck a screwdriver in there and just went like with the fucking screwdriver, and basically loosened that corrosion out of the way. And as soon as that was done, fucker opened right up. So then I pulled the whole lock apart and lubricated it. So if you are thinking about buying this bike, or if you have a Kawasaki that's getting on in the years, lubricate this. Like, you probably should anyway. I don't know why I didn't, but keep that a regular thing. If you're lubing your chain, get a little bit of whether you want to use white lithium grease or whatever. I hear that's great for locks. Get some lube in there, because it's probably going to seize up at some point. And it makes me wonder about the ignition. But so far I haven't really had any issues with the ignition, aside from it getting a little wonky because my key's slightly bent from trying to do this. I have a spare key that's straight, but I want to save that until I actually need it. And then I have had battery issues, but they're all caused by me. I had the original battery for a long time. I had accidentally killed it like 2 or 3 times with my heated gear. So it was cold. I was helping my buddy learn to ride. I flicked the bike off to talk to him, but my heated gear was still plugged in and warming. So it was just drawing straight out of the battery, which will drain the battery in minutes. And killed the bike then, so I jumped it. And I went on for a couple of years, no issues, until I got back from LA. My heated gear lead, because I brought that with me, my heated gear lead got corroded. I didn't realize it, but inside the little barrel connector, the positive and the negative were making a slight connection with very low resistance, draining the battery slowly. So I replaced the battery once, and that died, and I was like, fuck. And then I replaced the battery a second time, the one that's in it now, and I took off that lead, and it has had no issues since. So the only reliability issues with this bike have been this gas cap. That's really the only one. So if you're buying a Z, you definitely want to lubricate this. When it's lubed, it's fine. You want to make sure you keep that nice and lubed. If you do that, I don't think you're going to have any issues. After mine has been lubed, it's been fine. I haven't had any issues. It feels smooth as butter. And then if you're going to run heated gear, if your lead gets anywhere near corroded, replace that shit. And you should be hitting it with contact cleaner regularly. If you don't, you're going to have problems like I did, killing the battery. Other than that, this bike has been 100%, and I mean 100% reliable. If you discount any battery issues, it has never not started on me. Like, it always starts. It never fucking gives you any issues. Doesn't matter how cold it is. I rode this thing in Chicago winters down to like 20 degrees. Bike didn't give a flying fuck. Like, 100% super reliable. And as you can see right there, it's a great handling motorcycle. This bike has had nothing but oil changes. Oil changes, gas, and coolant. You know, I changed the coolant over to water with water wetted for track days because I was getting ready for advanced. That's it. You know? There's literally been no stock air filter, you know, like dirty corner, sorry. So like, doesn't need anything. It's never needed anything to run. Never needed any parts. Never had any issues with, you know, stock clutch. And you see me do clutch up wheelies, right? It's a fucking stock clutch, 30,000 miles on, still easily gripping and doing these wheelies, not feeling like it's going or slipping or anything like that. So like, I don't want a bike that's going to need a new clutch every 10,000 miles or every 5,000 miles. This bike did need a chain and sprockets at 18,000 miles. But I think that's about standard. 18,000 miles is about what you can expect from a chain and sprockets. And with all the track days that I had done, and the wheelies and all that shit, riding in the winters of Chicago when they're putting salt on the roads, I think 18,000 miles is more than enough out of a chain. You know, that's plenty. So that's my thoughts on the Z. You know, like, I love it. You know, it's a fantastic bike. It's everything you could need, you know. It does everything that you want. It does everything that you could possibly want to do on a motorcycle, minus off-road. Other than that, you know, you're good to go. Go hit some track days. Go hit the canyons with your friends. Ride to work. Ride with the Harley guys. Whatever you want to do, just cruise on it. Throw some saddlebags on. Do a tour. It's totally up to you, you know. It's an everyday, every situation bike. and I love it. You know, it'll put a spanking on any 600 out there up to about 140. It's got that low-end torque to just make it super easy to ride in the city. What's not to love about it? It's such an amazing bike.